Once again, Christian greetings to all our valued listeners and viewers throughout the whole world, more particularly to all Shepherd's Rod believers, and most especially to our beloved brothers and sisters in the United States of America. Special greetings to our brethren in Colorado, our brethren in Georgia, Fiji Island, Mexico, Spain, in Africa, to the United Kingdom, and to our brethren in Australia, and to the rest of the 144,000 living saints scattered abroad, greetings. May the good Lord bless you, brothers and sisters. This is our episode number 3, the subject concerning the presidential election of the United States of America, by which the Shepherd's Rod declared clearly in 2TG 41 page 4 that the most exciting current event is the presidential election in the United States of America. And we fully believe that that statement is even more definitely applied this particular year, 2020. This coming presidential election on November 3, 2020. And we already declared that as far as the Bible, the Spur Prophecy, and the Shepherd's Rod, this is the last presidential election in the United States of America. That after this presidential election, great changes will happen. And the final movements will be rapid ones, according to Volume 9, page 11. And the prophecy will be fulfilled in quick succession. TM page 116. Now at this time, we need to focus our attention to the divine command given by Jesus Christ in Matthew 24, verse 15, according to tract number 12, page 81, saying, tract number 12 on page 81 says that these 3 links of truth, polluting of the sanctuary, the taking away of the daily, and the placing of the abomination in the prophetic chain of events, bring us several centuries into the Christian era, is conclusively confirmed by Christ referring to them as in the future from the time He uttered the command. So Matthew 24, verse 15 and 16 is a divine command given by Jesus Christ. And that divine command, without any doubts, is directed to the saints that will no longer to taste death. First, according to this reading, that such divine command in the prophetic chain of events brings us several centuries into the Christian era. The Christian era commenced in 31 AD, and century consists of 100 years. And the word several must be at least 3 or more than 3. Therefore, we can easily understand that such divine command must find its fulfillment at least 300 years or more than 300 years from 31 AD. So 31 plus 300, it must be at least 331 AD. And I know that every Davidian knoweth that it is primarily applied to the occurrence in the Dark Ages. But such divine command of Jesus Christ, there is no possibility that those people living in that period of time can implicitly obey such divine injunction. First, to understand the book of Daniel. How could they understand the book if God Himself declared and decreed that the book is sealed and cannot be understood, not until to the time of the end, as stated in Daniel 12, verse 4. It says here in 2TG number 7, page 3, Daniel was told to shut and seal the book even to the time of the end. The book, therefore, was not for the understanding of the people before the time of the end. And in 2 Azar 111, it says, the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation were written especially for the generation living at the time of the end, and not so much for the Roman world. See Daniel 12 verse 4. They had no understanding of the writings that pertain to the last days, and thus could not have profited by them. To us our page 111. Obviously, therefore, the statement in tract number 3, page 25, saying, from this juxtaposition of Daniel 8 verse 11 and 12 and Daniel 11 verse 31, the reader will observe that both scriptures are speaking of the same power. And Christ predicting the signs of the end of the world as you look forward along the stream of time declared, when ye, his followers, who were to be living at the time that this horn power was at work against God, at work against his truth, and at work against his people, therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Matthew 24 verse 15 and 16. These clear words of Christ himself place the work of this power in the future from his time. Tract number 3, page 25. We already established solidly with concrete evidence that such divine command of Jesus Christ must be to the time when the book of Daniel is open. For how could they be able to obey such divine injunction to understand the book at the time when such understanding was not yet bestowed by God to understand the book of Daniel? And there is a divinely appointed time by which the book must be opened, and that is in the time of the end. And the shepherd's rod plainly declared in 3 Symbolic Code 8 to 10, page 8, it says, this time must have begun when the book began to be opened. But if we must declare the beginning of that time in more specific terms, it in a spatial sense began in the year 1844. The time of the end is the period just before the end of the world. 3 Symbolic Code 8 to 10, page 8. So the time of the end, in more specific term, commenced in the year 1844. But everybody knew that the time of the end, which commenced in the year 1844, is divided into two sections. The time of the end in the period of the judgment that pertains to the dead, and the time of the end in the period of the judgment that pertains to the living. And without any doubts, the time of the end by which such predicted event will be finally materialized is in the second section of the time of the end, in the judgment that pertains to the living. Now, I would like to quote that statement saying in 2 TG 24:23 that let us be God's real people, logical thinkers, and not bait hunters. And also the statement in 2 TG number 6, page 15, saying that let us be a deep Bible students, brothers and sisters, and not superficial readers. Now the statement in tract number 3, page 25, saying, when ye, pointing to the followers of Christ who were to be living in the time that this horn power was at work against God, against His truth, and against His people. How do we know, in what way, that we could discern clearly that such horn power is already at work? That such horn power is already at work against God, against His truth, and against His people. What truth mentioned there? Since the verses quoted in tract number 3, page 25, is Daniel 8, verse 11 and 12, and Daniel 11, verse 31. There is no other truth except the daily in the sanctuary. Now, I would like to read again the statement in 2SR, page 139. The Bible is the revelation of creation and redemption in Christ, Creator and Redeemer. Therefore, the Sabbath and the sanctuary constitute the truth See Hebrews chapter 9, verse 10. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 4 to 10. Thus, these two doctrines are coupled together, cannot be separated, and bear the whole truth. So that is very plain. That such two doctrines have been coupled together, and it cannot be separated. And still, you say that you bear the whole truth. Now, let us read 2SR page 131. It says, therefore, 2SR 131, therefore, the daily and the sanctuary must hold truth vital to the Christian church. And the prophet declared that it was to be trodden underfoot. I would like to remind again that prophecies are the more sure word. Track number 12, page 57, the more sure word of prophecy never fails to tell the truth, because it is the more sure word. It says here in the Old Symbolic Code, for Symbolic Code 10 to 12, page 3, this scripture declares that prophecy is the more sure word, and that it is as a light that shines in a dark place, and that when it is understood, it makes the subject so plain that its clearness is compared by inspiration as a day star in our hearts. And of all the prophecies ever recorded in the Bible, the book of Daniel is very important because it was especially mentioned by Jesus Christ. And not only especially mentioned, but there is a divine injunction attached. And first of all, it says, read the book of Daniel. Study the book of Daniel and understand that book. I remember the statement in, I think that is in track number 3, by which B.D. Hotep used the term that such understanding must be with divine authority. Track number 3 on page, let me see if I could find that statement. It is concerning when the statement concerning 1 Peter chapter 3 verse 18 and 19, saying that such interpretation must be divine authority. Track number 3. I already said track number 3. I lost the page here. That is somewhere in page 100 concerning the spirits. Now let us go back again to our reading. I think that statement is also the same with, because I lost the page, saying interpretation is correct only. You can find that in track number 3, in the last pages, saying such concerning the spirits, when the commentary of 1 Peter chapter 3 verse 18 to 20, whether Jesus Christ, the word spirits, if it is referring to the dead or to the living. 2SR page 78, it says, interpretation is correct only when inspired by the same spirit, thus timely utterances are revealed. 2SR page 78. Now let us go back to the reading in 2SR page 131. It says, therefore the daily and the sanctuary must hold truth vital to the Christian church, and the prophet declared that it was to be trodden underfoot. Brethren, it would be better for us to believe what the prophecy hath declared than to believe what our finite observation discerned. Because not only the prophecy is sure word, but the statement, the more sure word. Now let us read again to us our page 131. Therefore, the daily and the sanctuary must hold truth vital to the Christian church. Very important. But the prophet declared that it was to be trodden underfoot. It was to be trodden underfoot. Why is it that Jesus Christ gave such an absolute injunction, divine command, to study closely the book of Daniel, particularly to the horn power, according to track number 3 on page 25. When the horn power is at work against God, against His truth, and against His people. Now, I invite all the Bidian to study this very important prophecy. Now, let us read again track number 3 on page 39. And as the great horn of the he-goat is symbolical of the Roman world, represented by iron in Daniel 2 verse 40, in its three periods, first pagan, second ecclesiastical, and third Protestant. Also as in its second period, it trod the truth and the host underfoot and polluted the sanctuary by bringing in the abominations, while it practiced and prospered. Daniel 8 verse 12. The 2,300-day period accordingly extends beyond the fall of ecclesiastical Rome and reaches into the Protestant period. Now remember, Daniel 8, 11 and 12 and Daniel 11 verse 31 is speaking of the same power. According to track number 3, page 25. And according to track number 12, page 81, that when Jesus Christ uttered the words, the fulfillment of such prophecy brings us several centuries to the Christian era. The word several cannot be applied if it is only 2 centuries, because the word several can only be used if it is 3 or more than 3. Therefore, Daniel 8, 11, and 12 must be applied only to the last 2 periods of the exceeding great horn. The second period, ecclesiastical Rome, and the last period, the Protestant period, by which the shepherd's rod declared clearly that if the daily and the sanctuary had been trodden underfoot in the period of the ecclesiastical Rome, it will also be trodden underfoot in the last period of the exceeding great horn, the Protestant period. First of all, according to the shepherd's rod in 2 SR, page 27 and page 28, it says, a large portion of Christendom agree that we are living in the last days of this world history. Then it says, when Jesus was asked by his disciple for the signs of his return to earth again and of the end of the world, one of the many signs he gave was, when ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Matthew 24 verse 15. It is evident from the words of the Master that the book of Daniel contains information regarding the signs of the times and of the end of the world. What is the book of Daniel? Contains information regarding the signs of the times and of the end of the world. The prophecies of Daniel were of little worth to the disciples and the early Christian church, for Daniel says the book was sealed to the time of the end. Daniel 12 verse 4. 2 SR page 27 and page 28. I would like to read to you the statement in 1 SR Pocket Edition on page 58. Let us read. It says, but now at the appointed time, he himself reveals their significance to the very people for whom they were originally and especially designed. It says, but now at the appointed time, he himself reveals their significance to the very people for whom they were originally and especially designed. If the people by which they were originally and especially designed is in the first advent of Jesus Christ, then there is no reason for God that He would not reveal to them the significance of the book of Daniel. If the people by which they were originally and especially designed is the people living during the dark ages, there is no reason for God to hide from their understanding concerning the book of Daniel. And the mere fact that God did not bestow unto them the understanding concerning the book of Daniel is the strongest proof that cannot be denied. They were not the people by which the book were originally and especially designed for them. It must be to the people living in the time of the end. And without any doubts, it must be to the people living in the time of the end, in the judgment that pertains to the living. Now, I would like to read 2 SR. It says here, 131. 2 SR, page 131. Jesus calls the daily and the sanctuary holy place. I would like to read again the statement. Jesus calls the daily and the sanctuary holy place. Why? Why is it that Jesus Christ calls the sanctuary in Daniel 8:11 to 13 holy place? What is the accurate significance? Why is it that Jesus Christ calls the sanctuary the holy place? Now, I would like to read again the statement. In tract number 5, page 32, it says, the statements which must shortly come to pass, Revelation 1 verse 1, and I will show the things which must be hereafter, Revelation 4 verse 1, go to say that the revelation is given with the one particular object in view of showing the things lying not behind, but ahead of John's time, with reference being made only incidentally to the past, in order to lay the necessary foundation upon which to build the future. In page 33 and 34, so though all such prophecies necessarily bring to our attention things which took place centuries ago, yet they are designed, like the revelation, to show to God's people things which must shortly come to pass. Fulfilled prophecies are seen therefore to be employed by the Scriptures only as groundwork for that part of prophecy which is yet to be fulfilled. Therefore, in that reading, we can easily discern that the occurrence during the period of ecclesiastical Rome, during the Dark Ages, by which the daily and the sanctuary had been trodden underfoot, is only the groundwork, not the particular object in view. Or in other words, it is the type, by which the type, according to 1 SR 226, the types themselves are not the true object, no more than a photograph is, but it is a representation which pictures and unmistakable evidence the object in view. 1 SR 226. The type themselves are not the true object, but it is a photograph, a representation which pictures with unmistakable evidence the particular object in view. What is the picture? Because the picture tells the whole story. I remember that reading in 1 SR page 124. The picture tells the story. Symbols do not lie. Now let us now view the picture in the past. How does the exceeding great horn successfully trodden underfoot the daily and the sanctuary, so that we could understand that predicted event in tract number 3 on page 39, that if the daily and the sanctuary had been trodden underfoot in the period of ecclesiastical Rome, it will also be trodden underfoot in the Protestant period. It will be trodden underfoot in the last period of the exceeding great horn, by which we explain several times that the Bible cannot be mistaken, says that the horn bears rule over all the earth. 2 SR page 139. The horn bears rule over all the earth. Now, it says, these are facts which cannot be denied. It's up to us if we will deny the absolute fact that the horn bears rule over all the earth. If you are living in the first advent of Jesus Christ, if you don't believe the prophecy, would you think you will believe that all the Jewish nation is in the bottomless pit? That all the religious organizations, scribes, Pharisees, Sadducees, with all others, all of them are instruments of Satan in the human point of view, in their finite observation. Their dignity cannot be questioned. That is very plain in 2 TG 41, page 8. They were the more religious people, the more praying people, but they were the very ones who rejected the message of Jesus Christ and crucified the Savior. Now let us read again 2 SR page 139. The horn bears rule over all the earth. And it says, these are facts which cannot be denied. However, there is another proof that bears evidence of the same, say the prophet. And after thee, king of Babylon, shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. who shall be rule all over the earth? The kingdom of brass. Then the shepherd's rod says, the brass kingdom is accepted to represent Grecia, but the fact is that Grecia never did be ruled over all the earth. The most distant point of the compass reached by Alexander the Great was a portion of India. Neither did Imperial Rome be ruled over all the earth. What then? Is Daniel wrong in the interpretation of the dream? If there is any error, Daniel cannot be at fault. The responsibility would naturally fall on God, who was the overseer of all the writings, the interpretation of the scriptures. If Daniel had made a mistake, it was God's duty to have him correct it. But as God is perfect in all his work, he cannot allow error in his holy word. Daniel is correct in his interpretation, and the brass kingdom must be ruled over all the earth, for all else may fail, but God's word shall stand forever. And since the shepherds have declared clearly that the pagan Rome and imperial Rome and Grecia never be ruled all over the earth, then the only tenable conclusion is that the same with the explanation in Zechariah chapter 6, that brass has a numerical value of number 3. Track number 2, page 13. While brass being third to gold precisely fits the third empire, Grecia, and consequently has the numerical value of 3, which can be easily understood that it is in the third period of the exceeding great horn that the exceeding great horn bears rule all over the earth, or rule over all the earth. And there is no other period represented by the third period of the exceeding great horn except in the Protestant period. The period followed the Dark Ages, also as stated in 2TG 22, page 22 and page 23, represented by the white tin. That is the Protestant period. And the shepherd's rod declared clearly in 2SR 140, it says, had Daniel said of the nondescript beast, symbol of imperial and papal Rome, that it would be ruled over all the earth, the claim would prove incorrect. 2SR page 140. But we have, brothers and sisters, the picture. Before going first to the picture, the shepherd's rod already declared that the exceeding great horn does not bear rule over all the earth on the pagan period and on the ecclesiastical period. We explained it several times, brothers and sisters, that the prediction given by Daniel, according to track number 4 on page 26, let us read again the statement given by the shepherd's rod. Track number 4 on page 26. Note that the truth, what is the truth? The daily and the sanctuary. 2SR 139. That is the truth. And who said it? That the truth is the daily and the sanctuary? Jesus Christ. Let us read again the statement in 2SR. It says that Jesus Christ himself called the daily and the sanctuary the truth. So, it is Jesus Christ who declared that the daily and the sanctuary is called the truth. And that truth, accordingly, is coupled together and cannot be separated and still bear the whole truth. What does it mean, brothers and sisters? I would like to read 2SR 138. Truly, are people working for God or for themselves? The angel, in giving instruction to Daniel, calls the Sabbath and the sanctuary truth the truth. So the Sabbath and the sanctuary truth, it is called the truth, by which that truth is coupled together and cannot be separated. If that truth, the Sabbath, is separated to the sanctuary truth, that Sabbath cannot be the Lord's Sabbath. That is the Jewish Sabbath. Now, we will gradually explain to you what is the difference between the Jewish Sabbath and the Lord's Sabbath, that we of ourselves can easily recognize if the Sabbath by which we are resting every week, we can rest assured that such Sabbath is the Lord's Sabbath and not the Jewish Sabbath. Because the Jewish Sabbath and the Lord's Sabbath falls on the same day. I would like to read to you the statement here on 1888. It says, it is absolutely impossible. So let's read this reading. It is concerning the Jewish Sabbath. It is absolutely impossible for one who is not a Christian to keep the Lord's Sabbath. And we know that the reality is that thousands of Jewish people resting on the Sabbath, but they were not Christian. If they were not Christian, then they had not been able to enter into the Lord's Sabbath, because it is impossible for one who is not a Christian to keep the Lord's Sabbath. The Bible is very plain in Hebrews chapter 4. The reason that those people came out from Egypt and God brought them to the wilderness, they had not been able to enter into the Lord's Sabbath, although they were resting on the seventh day, because of unbelief. They were not full-fledged believer of Jesus Christ. So it says here, it is absolutely impossible for one who is not a Christian to keep the Lord's Sabbath. For as we have seen, God's rest comes only from His perfect work, which is found only in Christ. We which believe do enter into rest. Therefore, no Jew, so-called as distinguished from a believer in Christ, keeps the Sabbath of the Lord, even though he apparently rests on the seventh day of the week. His rest is his own rest, and not the rest of the Lord. Do you see the difference? The Jewish Sabbath falls on the same day of the week as the Sabbath of the Lord, but it is not by any means the same thing. It represents only the man himself and his own work, instead of being the sign of justification by faith in the work of the Lord. It is the sign of self-righteousness, as indicated by the question which the Jews asked of Jesus, "What shall we do that we might work the works of God?" What shall we do that we might work the works of God? What is the absolute answer given by Jesus Christ in Lessons on Faith? In Lessons on Faith. That is quoted in, I think, on John chapter 6. Let us read Lessons on Faith. When the Jewish people asked Jesus, "What shall we do that we might work the works of the Lord?" And the answer of Jesus Christ is so simple and direct, right? Page 67. On one occasion, the Jews said unto Jesus, Lessons on Faith, page 67. On one occasion, the Jews said unto Jesus, "What shall we do that we might work the works of God?" Just the thing that we want to know. Mark the reply. So, observe the clear words of Jesus Christ. This is the work of God, that ye believe on Him whom He hath sent. John chapter 6, verse 28 and 29. So, it says, mark the reply. What is the reply? This is the work of God, that ye believe on Him whom He hath sent. John chapter 6, verse 28 and verse 29. Now, let us continue reading on our reading. It says, instead of being the sign of justification by faith in the work of the Lord, it is the sign of self-righteousness, as indicated by the question which the Jews asked of Jesus, "What shall we do that we might work the works of God?" John chapter 6, verse 28. And in Lessons on Faith, it says, mark the reply. Very simple. The only way that you can work the works of God, you must believe on Him whom God hath sent. Then it says, they counted their own works equal to God's works. Their obedience was not the obedience of faith, but only of form. So what is the difference between the obedience of faith and the obedience which is only of form or formality? And it says, from such a Sabbath may the Lord deliver us. Or if you are resting the Jewish Sabbath, may the Lord deliver us from that Sabbath. It is from it that we are delivered in the Sabbath of the Lord. For we are saved from our own works and given the perfect works of the Lord. The seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord, but let us beware of making it a mere caricature of rest. Let us take it for what it is, the rest of the Lord. Now let's go back to our subject. To repeat again, if the Sabbath by which you are resting is not coupled together, the sanctuary truth, even to this day, you did not as yet entered into the Lord's Sabbath. Every week, you are resting the Jewish Sabbath. Now, let us go back again to the reading in track number 4, page 26. Note that the truth and the place, not the sanctuary itself, were cast down. That is, both Christ's truth and His place in the earthly sanctuary were set aside so that the knowledge as to His mediatorial work became obscured. Track number 4, page 26. The statement is very plain. No, it is not the truth alone that had been trodden underfoot, but as well as the place. Or in other words, the statement in track number 4, page 26, must be pointing to the perfect fulfillment of that prediction that the horn shall be rule over all the earth, by which that prediction must be found in the period represented by the brass, by which the brass has a numerical value of number 3, indicating that that fulfillment must found in the last period of the exceeding great horn in the Protestant period, by which such prediction that not only the sanctuary alone that had been trodden underfoot, but as well as the place. What does it mean? Historically, everybody knows that on the first period of the exceeding great horn, pagan Rome, the daily and the sanctuary had been trodden underfoot, but the fact is that the place had not been trodden underfoot. Because in that very place, by which the daily and the sanctuary had been trodden underfoot, represented by the Jewish church, God raised up the apostolic church. Therefore, it cannot be said that the horn bears rule over all the earth. How about in the second period, ecclesiastical Rome? Yes, the daily and the sanctuary had been trodden underfoot in that period of time. But on the very place by which the daily and the sanctuary have been trodden underfoot in the old world, in the continent of Europe, God has a church by which, according to the shepherd's rod in 2SR 142, it says, again note that the truth was cast down, and the woman, the church, had fled into the wilderness. Inspiration says she had a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there. See verses 6 and 14. So while the truth was cast down by the church leadership in that period and the abominations set up, God had some in obscurity who keep His Sabbath and had knowledge of the sanctuary truth through the entire 1,260 years of wilderness journey that she was now feed, revealing that she was to return. To SR page 142. So that is very plain, that only in the third period of the exceeding great horn that the horn bears rule over all the earth. And the most important thing is that on the first period of exceeding great horn, that is pointing to Palestine, Palestine never represented by the earth. The second period of the ecclesiastical Rome, the old world never represented by the earth. It is represented by the sea. Palestine and the continent of Europe, both of them are represented by the sea. According to the shepherd's rod, according to the spirit of prophecy, Great Controversy 440, track number 5, page 45. And there is no other represented by the earth except the two-horned beast domain, the United States of America. Now, let us now go to the picture, brothers and sisters. I remember B.T. Hotep says on 1SR, I would like to read this reading on page 66. 1SR, page 66. In 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 11 and 12, speaking of the experience of the children of Israel, we read, now all these things happen unto them for examples, and they are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. Wherefore let him that thinketh he standeth take heed, lest he fall. If we are the people upon whom the end of the world is about to come, then their ensamples are written for our admonition. This is the reason why God led the children of Israel into Egypt. This is the reason why God led the children of Israel into Egypt and back again. Then it says, think how great the price to work out the picture. The lessons to be derived from these great examples are far greater than we have ever realized. Many thousands lost their lives to produce the picture, with the intention that many more thousands would be saved than those who perish. Let us therefore carefully study into the lessons that were intended for our learning, and and admonition. But I would like to focus our attention to the picture during the Dark Ages. Millions of lives had been sacrificed just to produce the picture. What picture? How the exceeding great horn trodden underfoot. In that period of millions of lives had been sacrificed just to produce the picture. I would like to read 2SR. Let us read 2SR page 139. It says here, the horn bears rule over all the earth. And it says it is a summary. 2SR 139. The horn bears rule over all the earth. In order to fully comprehend what is being taught in this chapter, we again call attention to the chart on page 128. Now let us follow the chart along with the reading. In the foregoing study, it is proven that the exceeding great horn of the goat does not represent imperial Rome only, but also papal Rome and the present world as well. For the horn first persecuted Christ and his followers under the jurisdiction of the Roman monarchy. The truth expressed by the daily and the sanctuary were trodden down by reason of transgression in the period of the broken state of Rome up to 508 AD. For the imperial government came to an end in the year 476. Furthermore, the papal power treats God's truth on the ground up to the termination of the prophetic 1,260 years and ended with the imprisonment of the Pope in 1798. But the sanctuary and the daily were held to the ground by the great horn up to 1844. At that time, he lost control of them, and the power of the three angels' messages raised the truth from the ground or from underfoot and placed it in the church. Therefore, the great horn is a symbol of the entire New Testament period to the second coming of Christ, corresponding with the legs of iron and the feet and toes of the great image of Daniel chapter 2. Now let us analyze closely this paragraph. Who raised up the truth from the ground? The power of the message of the third angel. So that is very plain. The power of the message of the third angel. Now let us focus for a while concerning the third angel's message. Now I would like to read General Conference Special on page 39. Let's read General Conference Special on page 39. It says, in fact, the three angels' messages are applicable to the judgment for the dead only indirectly. For the judgment for the living is the all-important event. That is, the angel is not sent particularly to explain what the judgment does to the dead, but what it is to do to the living. General Conference Special, page 39. That is very plain. Concerning the message of the third angel, it is directly, particularly applied to the judgment that pertains to the living. What is the message of the third angel? There are only two main subjects concerning the message of the third angel. First, the mark of the beast. Let us go back again to the reading in volume 6, page 17. Volume 6, page 17. Let's read the statement. Volume 6, page 17. It says, the light we have received upon the third angel's message is the true light. The mark of the beast is exactly what it has been proclaimed to be. Not all in regard to this matter is yet understood, nor will it be understood until the unrolling of the scroll. Volume 6, page 17. How about in great controversy, page 435? Now let's read again the statement given by the voice of inspiration. Those who had accepted the light concerning the mediation of Christ and the perpetuity of the law of God found that these were the truths presented in Revelation chapter 14. The messages of this chapter constitute a threefold warning, which is to prepare the inhabitants of the earth for the Lord's second coming. And the second coming mentioned here cannot be the second visible coming of Jesus Christ, which is closely connected to our reading in 2SR 139. The statement is very plain, that the exceeding great horn had lost control of the daily and the sanctuary. When? When he loses control of the daily and the sanctuary. When Jesus Christ entered into the most holy place. October 22, 1844. But it is not the perfect fulfillment of the prophecy, because the perfect fulfillment of the prophecy is the second coming of Christ. Second coming of what? The coming of the bridegroom to the most holy place. The coming of the bridegroom to the most holy place. And it is called the midnight cry. Now, I would like to read again the statement in 2SR page 181. Let me read to you. The midnight cry was first proclaimed prior to 1844, and the coming of the bridegroom was Christ coming to the most holy place in the heavenly sanctuary for the investigative judgment of the saints. And according to 2SR page 184, it says, the coming of Christ as our high priest to the most holy place for the cleansing of the sanctuary brought to view in Daniel 8 verse 14. What is the coming of Christ brought to view in Daniel 8 verse 14? That is the coming of Christ to the most holy place. The coming of Jesus Christ to the most holy place. And it is called the coming of the bridegroom, according to our reading in 2SR page 181. And the shepherd's ram declared clearly, brethren, in 2SR page 242, concerning that coming to the most holy place, it says, it would have been unreasonable and an injustice to the chosen people of God if he should have left them in darkness concerning the time of the most important event of all church history, the coming of Christ. That part of the long prophetic period of the 2,300 days or years of Daniel 8:14. What coming is that? The coming of Jesus Christ to the most holy place. Brothers and sisters, the coming of Jesus Christ to the most holy place. That is the coming of the bridegroom, by which, according to the shepherd's rod, it would be unreasonable, and not only unreasonable, but also injustice to the chosen people of God, if God would left them in darkness concerning the most important event of all the history of the church, the second coming of Jesus Christ to the most holy place. That is very plain on that reading in 2SR 242. And that's what it means in the statement in 2SR 220, saying, if God faithfully revealed to the living the commencement of the judgment for the dead, it says, 2SR 220, if God so faithfully revealed to the living the commencement of the judgment for the dead, it cannot be possible that he would keep secret the time of the judgment for the living. If he did, we would have no present truth in the time of the last seal. Neither could there be justice in such secrecy, nor could such judgment be legal. Therefore, a revelation of the judgment for the living is of as great importance as the revelation of the gospel itself. For the judgment, blotting out the sins, is the crowning act in the gospel of Christ. Thus we conclude that when the seal is opened and the judgment for the living begins, we must know it. The day of atonement in its type proves the same, for the Israelites were well informed of the event, their duty, and the consequence. 2SR page 220. Now, going back again to the reading in 2SR page 139, I would like to read again the statement. 2SR page 139, it says, but the sanctuary and the daily were held to the ground by the great horn up to 1844. At that time, he lost control of them. So that is the picture. We can easily understand the clear words of Jesus Christ that according to the picture, it is definitely stated that the daily and the sanctuary had been trodden underfoot. When Christ's mediatorial work is in the holy place. That is the reason why Jesus Christ called the daily and the sanctuary holy place. To let us know, to inform us that when Jesus Christ is officiating in the holy place, the exceeding great horn had trodden underfoot. What does it mean by trodden underfoot? We already explained, right? Matthew chapter 5, verse 13. In the parable of Jesus Christ, trodden underfoot meaning lost its value. Although the daily and the sanctuary is very vital, very important, according to the Shepherd's Rod in 2SR 131, saying, therefore, the daily and the sanctuary must hold truth vital to the Christian church, and the prophet declared that it was to be trodden underfoot. And the clear words of Jesus Christ says, stand in the holy place. What does it mean? Meaning, when Jesus Christ is officiating in the holy place, that is the time by which the exceeding great horn trodden underfoot the daily and the sanctuary. On the picture, when does Jesus Christ officiated in the holy place? In the Great Controversy, page 421, it says, let us read the Great Controversy, page 421. For 18 centuries, this work of ministration continued in the first apartment of the sanctuary. How many years? 1,800 years. So it's easy to understand. 1844 minus 1,800, that would fall in 44 AD. So Christ's mediatorial work, which commenced in the holy place, began in 44 AD. And that is the reason why Apostle Paul declared clearly that in the middle of the first century, the mystery of iniquity began to creep into the church to trodden underfoot the daily and the sanctuary. How does the daily, which is the Sabbath, have been trodden underfoot? It is in the first century, brothers and sisters. Although Sunday was introduced in 321 AD, but at the time when the Christians were resting on the Sabbath, separated from the sanctuary truth, they were no longer resting the Lord's Sabbath, but rather the Jewish Sabbath. And that is very plain in the Great Controversy, page 49. Let us read the Great Controversy, page 49. The Apostle Paul, in his second letter to the Thessalonians, foretold the great apostasy which would result in the establishment of the papal power. He declared that the day of Christ should not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God seated in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. And furthermore, the apostle warns his brethren that the mystery of iniquity that already worked, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3, 4, and 7. Even at that early date, you see, on the first century, he saw creeping into the church errors that would prepare the way for the development of the papacy. That is the second period of the exceeding great horn. Therefore, in the middle of the first century, gradually the daily and the sanctuary have been trodden underfoot. But first, they were resting Sabbath, but no longer the Lord's Sabbath, because gradually they lost sight of concerning Christ's mediatorial work in the heavenly sanctuary. What does it mean by trodden underfoot? Lost its value. Matthew 5, verse 13. Meaning, they will no longer discussing Christ's mediatorial work in the heavenly sanctuary. And gradually, not only the sanctuary truth had been taken away, but in 508 AD, the Sabbath as well had been taken away. And then in 538 AD, the papacy had been set up. That is the picture. So in the perfect fulfillment of the prophecy, we can easily discern that God is telling you and I that the period of time by which the exceeding great horn bears rule over all the earth is at the time when Christ's mediatorial work is in the holy place. Now, let us go back again in the statement in Testimonies for the Church, Volume 2, saying, Christ returned to the most holy place. And no one would disagree that the word return can only be applied at least second time or third time, but not to the first time. Jesus Christ entered to the most holy place in October 22, 1844. But you cannot apply the word His return to the most holy place. And also the word return cannot be applied if Jesus did not left the most holy place. If Jesus remained there forever, up to the general close of provision. So the statement here on Testimonies for the Church, Volume 2, page 190, it says, What time is here referred to? That is concerning Mark 13, verse 34. Bibles Bitihotep point it to the purification of the church. Now it says here, what time is here referred to? Not to the revelation of Christ in the clouds of heaven to find a people asleep. No, but to his return from his ministration in the most holy place of the heavenly sanctuary, when he lays up his priestly attire and clothes himself with the garment of vengeance. And when the mandate goes forth, he that is unjust, let him be unjust still. And he which is filthy, let him be filthy still. And he that is righteous, let him be righteous still. And he that is holy, let him be holy still. In the great controversy 490, it is called the irrevocable decision that will be pronounced in the heavenly sanctuary while God's people were still in their mortal state. And in this reading, in volume 2, page 190, this irrevocable decision will be pronounced after Jesus Christ returned from his ministration in the most holy place, and then he lays off his priestly attire and clothed himself with the garments of vengeance, and then pronounced the irrevocable decision. Although the shepherd's rod used the term when he will come again to the most holy place, bringing the names of the 144,000. To SR 241, therefore the prophecy by Enoch commenced its fulfillment in 1844, at which time the Lord came with the names and records of those who are sleeping in the grave. And when the investigation of the dead is finished, then he comes with the names of the living saints, first with the 144,000, and afterward with the great multitude of all nations and kindreds and peoples and tongues. Revelation 7, verse 9. That is synonymous when it says, when Jesus Christ will come to the most holy place, bringing the name of the 144,000, indicates his return to the most holy place. That is very plain, brothers and sisters. Now let us go back again to our subject. We already established the absolute fact that Jesus Christ, the plain words of Jesus Christ, very plain, that the daily and the sanctuary will be trodden underfoot. When? At the time when his mediation is in the holy place. I would like to say, brethren, God allowed the devil, Satan, that the daily and the sanctuary will be trodden underfoot in that period of time when Christ's mediatorial work in the heavenly sanctuary was still in the holy place. God allowed Satan to be trodden underfoot, the daily and the sanctuary, to produce the picture. If the knowledge concerning Christ's mediatorial work in the heavenly sanctuary is in absolute importance to all Christians, to all Christianity, then it would be injustice on the part of God's chosen people, more particularly to the four great denominations by which, according to the shepherd's rod in 2 SR 268, they were in total darkness concerning the daily and the sanctuary. Therefore, if that is the case, that to have complete understanding concerning Christ's proceedings in the most holy place is in absolute importance to obtain eternal life, then all of them, the constituent of the four great denominations, Lutherans, Presbyterian, Methodist, Baptist, as well as the Millerites movement, necessarily all of them were lost. But the absolute fact is that the knowledge concerning Christ's mediatorial work in the heavenly sanctuary is intended to the saints that will no longer to taste death. And that is the reason that God allowed Satan, that the daily and the sanctuary had been trodden underfoot in that period of time, just to produce the picture, so that God's people, the saints that will no longer to taste death, will have a clear view when the perfect fulfillment will finally be materialized. That in that period of time, when Jesus Christ is officiating in the holy place, that is the period of time by which the daily and the sanctuary will be trodden underfoot. Now, I would like to read to you the statement in 1888 concerning the Jewish Sabbath. So let's read. It says, I would like to read the Lord's Sabbath. The Lord's Sabbath has been sufficiently dwelt on for the present. Think it thoroughly. The Lord's Sabbath has been sufficiently dwelt on for the present. We know what it is. We have seen that the Jews' Sabbath is the observing of the form of the Lord's Sabbath without the substance, which can come only by faith. It falls on the same day, but it is man's Sabbath, not the Lord's. Although the Pope's Sabbath has nothing in common with the Sabbath of the Lord, not even in form, but utterly repudiates it. Thus, a papist book entitled A Sure Way to Find Out the True Religion says concerning the keeping of the Holy Sunday cannot be found in the Bible. What is the Lord's Sabbath? Has been sufficiently dwelt on for the present. That is the Lord's Sabbath. Dwelt on for the present. And the Shepherd's Rod says, the Sabbath and the sanctuary truth are coupled together, cannot be separated, and bear the whole truth. 2 SR 139. But what is the Lord's Sabbath? Especially, sufficiently dwells on the present. Present what? The present occurrence in the heavenly sanctuary. And it says, and we can see it only by faith, according to that reading of that statement by Alonzo Jones. B.T. Hotep himself declared clearly in 2TG. Let me read to you. It says, let us read the statement here given by the Shepherd's Rod, 2TG number 37 on page 11. What a gloomy life this would be if there were no history. If there were no possible way of knowing the past, and still worse would it be if there were no prophecy. If there were no way of getting an idea what the future holds. But worst of all would it be if there were no light on the present. And look at the illustration. To those people, boys, there is no light on the present. That is the most worst case. Let me illustrate. Suppose you should look out of your windows, both toward the east and toward the west, and you should see the land lighted for miles around, even to the horizon, but there was no light at all in your own home. Again, suppose you should wish to drive somewhere, and you had a flood of lights both on the rear and on the front and of your car, but the motor would not turn over. What good the car be to you, and what good the lights? That is the exact predicament you would be if you would be in if you understood history and you understood prophecy, but know nothing about your own spiritual condition, know not that you were being overcome the fiery darts of the devil. It would be like walking over a bridge which, unbeknown to you, was collapsing. And the great controversy, it says here on page 423, I would like to read to you, it says, light from the sanctuary, illumine the past, the present, and the future. Only the light from the sanctuary that could enlighten our spiritual eyes, our spiritual understanding concerning the past, concerning the future, but as well as the present. That is the most damaging darkness of all darkness, that Satan can keep God's people in darkness. To be in total ignorance. That is very plain in White House Recruiter, page 31 and 32. Let us not, however, forget that there is an enemy who is determined to keep God's people in darkness, in ignorance of timely truth. And what more damaging darkness could he seek to keep them in than in ignorance of that which God would have them to know, while their judgment is pending, while they are being weighed in the balances of the sanctuary? None. Absolutely none. We are now being weighed in the balances of the sanctuary, brethren. And according to the Shepherd's Rod, for if such case, it says here in tract number 3 on page 54, for when a person's judgment is pending and he is unaware of the fact, he will be unprepared and unable to stand when his case is investigated. We are the people that we need to know that our cases on the heavenly sanctuary are on trial. 2TG 12:30. And the Shepherd's Rod says in 2TG 12:29, John truly paid it as a prophecy, but when it actually takes place, then God's agency on earth, the spirit of prophecy in the church, is to proclaim that the event has actually taken place. Who will proclaim it? God's agency on earth, the spirit of prophecy in the church. This is the very message that you are listening every now and then, that while the judgment for the living is in progress, to us our page 219, while the judgment for the living is in progress, every sin must be confessed and put away. He who would neglect this great privilege will find himself involved in everlasting ruin, cut off from among his people. Ignoring this most vital subject would not profit us in the least. That is very plain, brothers and sisters. And I would like to remind you completely, according to the picture, the exceeding great horn had lost control of them. When Jesus Christ entered to the most holy place in October 22, 1844. But that is only the picture. This message is directed to all of them who are holding God's people in darkness, to all of them by which the exceeding great horn is manifested in their lives. Brothers and sisters, this is the very message in answerer number 4, page 22 and page 23. Concerning Isaiah 63, verse 3, it says the first part of the verse applies to the first advent of Christ and the last part to the time of the purification of the church. Purification of the church. That whoever continues to hold his people in bondage, in ignorance of his truth. What truth? The daily and the sanctuary. Will he tread in his anger and trample them in his fury, and sprinkle their blood upon his garments, thereby staining all his raiment, and thus setting his people free. Now I would like to read to you words to the little flock. Words to the little flock on page 5. It says, let's read the statement. The burden of this prophecy is time, concerning which there has been true and false visions. The true vision concerning light, or light on time, was written on the chart or table, Habakkuk 2 verse 2. God approved of the proclamation of 1844 and the 10th day of the 7th month 1844 by the pouring out of the Holy Ghost. When does the Holy Ghost have been poured out? The Day of Atonement, October 10, 1844. But that is Bible calendar. The Voice of Inspiration says, I would like to read to you. Volume 5, page 252. It says, there is altogether too little of the Spirit and power of God in the labor of the once man. The Spirit which characterized that wonderful meeting on the day of Pentecost is waiting to manifest its power upon the men who are now standing between the living and the dead as ambassadors for God. The power which stirred the people so mightily in the 1844 movement will again be revealed. The third angel's message will go forth not in whispered tones but with a loud voice. Volume 5, page 252. Brethren, I would like to read to you track number 5. Here it says on track number 5 on page 58. It says, the last 3 of the 7 trumpets being wood trumpets, unlike the first 4, some great change obviously is to take place between the first 4 and the last 3. Some great change. Although we'll continue that subject on the subject, the last 3 wood trumpets, but I would like to emphasize, let us distinctly separate the great change in the groundwork and the great change on the particular object in view. And on the particular object in view, I would like to read to you, brothers and sisters, here in 1 TG number 8, it says here. Let us read the statement on page 24. Who is to bring this revival and reformation? This great change. What is the great change? Revival and reformation. Who is to bring this revival and reformation? This great change. The branch. And according to Isaiah 11 verse 1 to 5, the branch is the Lord, the Son of David. What is the great change? The revival and reformation. 2 TG 44, let me read to you. Page 48. 2 TG 44, page 48. When this thorough reformation takes place, then the cleansing fountain shall be open to the whole house of David. When that cleansing fountain will be open, although we have a separate subject, but I would like to say that would be on the Day of Atonement. Now, I would like to read to you early writings, page 271. I heard those clothed with the armor speak forth the truth with great power. It had effect. Many had been bound, some wives by their husbands, and some children by their parents, the honest, who had been prevented from hearing the truth, now eagerly laid hold upon it. All fear of their relatives was gone, and the truth alone was exalted to them. They had been hungering and thirsting for truth. It was dearer and more precious than life. I asked what had made this great change. An angel answered, it is the latter, the refreshing from the presence of the Lord, the loud cry of the third angel. And that refreshing from the presence of the Lord, I already read to you the midnight cry. It was poured out on the Day of Atonement. Brethren, you cannot heal God's people in darkness forever. The entire place in the United States of America, as the Bible predicted, the daily and the sanctuary had been trodden underfoot. There is no movement, even one, and even single individual in the United States of America that discuss Christ's mediatorial work in the holy place. The only understanding that they had is that Jesus Christ entered to the most holy place in October 22, 1844. And they did not even know that Christ's mediatorial work in the holy place is about finished, and Jesus Christ is about to return to the most holy place. And that event that Jesus Christ will return to the most holy place, that would be on March 27, 2021. By which in Bible calendar, that is October 10, 2022, and at that time, history will repeat itself that the exceeding great horn had lost control, totally lost control of how he darkened the understanding of God's people concerning the daily and the sanctuary, and those whose names had been left written in the Lamb's Book of Life, they will lighten the earth with the glory of God. Brothers and sisters, the power of the third angel's message will raise the truth from the ground and will place it on its proper place, which is the church. But those people who will accept the message among spiritual Israel at the time when Jesus Christ already entered in the most holy place, and our names are not among the names by Jesus Christ brought into the presence of God the Father. After Jesus Christ pleaded God the Father, while he is pleading, according to the vision of the prophet, he wear the priestly garment. But after God the Father answer, grant his plea, he immediately take off his priestly attire and clothe himself with the garments of vengeance, and then pronounce the irrevocable decision. Brethren, the time is running out. We are getting closer and closer. And to repeat again, woe unto them who hinder this message. Woe unto them who speak evil against this message. Woe unto them that hinder God's people. You cannot do it forever. The time will come that you will completely lose control of them. And at the time that you recognize the fact that you lose control of them, the consequence is only lamentations, mourning, and woe. We will gnash our teeth in the outer darkness. We will continue this subject, brethren. May the good Lord bless you and have a beautiful, wonderful evening.